The small coastal town of Meridian was buzzing with excitement. For the first time in its modest history, a world-famous pianist would grace the stage of their local concert hall. Anton Volkov wasn't just any pianist. He was the pianist of the decade, the man whose fingers could make audiences weep or leap to their feet in a standing ovation. His recordings sold millions, and his concerts sold out within minutes of tickets becoming available. The news had spread like wildfire through Meridian 3 months ago. The town council had somehow convinced Volkov to include their humble venue in his international tour as part of a charity fundraiser for music education in rural schools. People had lined up overnight to purchase tickets, and now, just days before the performance, you couldn't walk down Main Street without overhearing at least one conversation about the upcoming concert. "I heard he only drinks water. That's been filtered 7 times, whispered Mrs. Patterson to her friend outside the local bakery. "And he travels with his own piano tuner who adjusts the instrument 6 times before every performance." Rumors like these had been circulating for weeks. Some were true, but most were greatly exaggerated. What wasn't exaggerated, however, was Anton Volkov's talent or his ego. The day before the concert, a sleek black car with tinted windows pulled up to the Grand Meridian Hotel. The staff had been preparing for this moment all week. The presidential suite had been cleaned 3 times over, with fresh flowers placed according to the detailed rider the pianist's team had sent ahead. The hotel manager rushed forward as the car door opened, eager to welcome their distinguished guest. But Volkov didn't even glance his way. The pianist strode through the lobby, sunglasses firmly in place despite being indoors, while his assistant dealt with check-in formalities. "Mr. Volkov requires absolute quiet on his floor between the hours of 10 p.m. and 11 a.m., the assistant Natalie explained in a hushed tone. "He'll take his meals in his suite, and housekeeping should only enter when he's at rehearsal." The manager nodded enthusiastically. Of course. We've prepared everything according to the instructions we received. Mr. Volkov will have complete privacy and comfort during his stay." As they spoke, Volkov was already in the elevator, examining his reflection in the mirrored walls and adjusting his perfectly styled hair. At 45, he still maintained the dashing good looks that graced magazine covers around the world. His dark hair had just the right amount of distinguished gray at the temples, and his tall, lean frame was always impeccably dressed in designer clothes. The following morning, Volkov arrived at Meridian Concert Hall for his rehearsal. The local staff had been there since dawn, making sure everything was perfect. The stage had been swept and mopped twice. The grand piano, the best the town could afford, had been tuned by the most respected piano tuner in the region. Volkov stepped onto the stage with the confidence of someone who owned every room he entered. He walked straight to the piano, ran his fingers over the keys without playing them, and frowned. "This is the instrument I'm expected to perform on?" he asked, his voice carrying across the empty hall. The venue director stepped forward nervously. "Yes, sir. It's a Steinway Model D. We had it completely restored last year specifically for special performances like yours." Volkov pressed a single key, listening to the note with narrowed eyes. "The action is too heavy," he declared. "And it's out of tune." "But sir, we had it tuned just yesterday by someone who clearly doesn't understand the subtleties required for a performance of my caliber," Volkov interrupted. "Natalie, call Thomas. He needs to fly in immediately." Natalie nodded and stepped aside to make the call. Thomas was Volkov's personal piano tuner who traveled with him for all his major concerts. The fact that the pianist hadn't brought him to this small-town performance showed how little importance he had placed on it. For the next hour, Volkov critiqued everything from the lighting, too harsh, it needs to be softer, more golden, to the temperature of the hall, 2 degrees too cold, to the chair at the piano, completely unsuitable for a 3-hour rehearsal. The local staff scurried about, trying to accommodate his demands, while exchanging glances of disbelief when his back was turned. No one dared to challenge him openly. After all, he was Anton Volkov, and they were lucky he had even agreed to come to their little town. "The acoustics in here are abysmal," he announced after playing a brief passage from Chopin. "We'll need to adjust the program. Remove the Debussy pieces. They require more nuance than this box can handle." Natalie made notes on her tablet while the venue director's face fell. The Debussy selections had been specifically mentioned in all the promotional materials. Perhaps we could try some adjustments to improve the acoustics, suggested the sound engineer, a local man named Tom who had worked at the hall for 20 years. Volkov looked at him as if he'd just suggested they perform the concert underwater. And what qualifies you to make such adjustments? Tom straightened his back. I've been working with musicians in this space for 2 decades, sir. I know its quirks better than anyone. 2 decades in Meridian is hardly a qualification, Volkov said with a dismissive wave of his hand. But by all means, try your adjustments. Just don't expect miracles. As rehearsal continued, Volkov's demands grew more specific and his patience shorter. When the lighting director couldn't achieve exactly the effect he wanted, Volkov threw his hands up in frustration. Is this really the best this town can offer? He asked no one in particular. Natalie approached him quietly. Anton, remember why we're here. The charity aspect, the children's music programs. For a brief moment, something resembling guilt flashed across Volkov's face. He nodded curtly and returned to the piano, slightly less combative but no less demanding. During a break in rehearsal, Volkov overheard some of the local staff chatting near the stage door. If he thinks our piano is bad, he should have seen what we were using before the restoration, one of them said with a chuckle. True, but you know who made that old upright sound like heaven? Rose. Remember when she played at the Winter Festival last year? I swear I saw grown men crying. Rose Winters is a local treasure, another agreed. Her students worship her. My niece takes lessons from her and says Rose can tell what you're feeling just by hearing you play the scales. Volkov sipped his specially imported mineral water, ears perking up despite himself. He was used to hearing about local talents wherever he went, amateur musicians who were considered brilliant in their small ponds. Usually these talents were mediocre at best when measured against true professionals. Who is this? Rose person? He asked, interrupting their conversation. The staff members turned, surprised to find him listening. Rose Winters, one of them explained. She teaches piano at the community music school. Used to travel and perform when she was younger, but she came back here about 15 years ago. Now she just teaches and plays for local events sometimes. And you think she's good? Volkov asked with a barely concealed smirk. Good doesn't begin to describe it, said Tom, the sound engineer. When Rose plays, it's like she's telling you her life story through the music. Not as flashy as some, but there's something about her playing that gets under your skin. Volkov raised an eyebrow. He'd heard similar descriptions before, usually, of technically limited players who compensated with what ordinary listeners mistook for emotion. Perhaps this Rose should be the one giving the charity concert instead of me, he said with a laugh. The staff exchanged uncomfortable glances, unsure how to respond to his mockery. Actually, Tom said slowly, she was asked to participate in the fundraiser initially, but she declined. She doesn't really do public performances anymore. This intrigued Volkov despite himself. A pianist who turned down opportunities to perform was either talentless and afraid of exposure, or dealing with some kind of psychological issue. Either way, it made for an interesting local story. As rehearsal resumed, Volkov found himself distracted by thoughts of this mysterious local piano teacher. By the end of the day, when he returned to his hotel suite exhausted and irritated by what he considered the venue's countless shortcomings, a small unexpected idea had taken root in his mind. That evening, as he dined on a specially prepared meal in his suite, he brought it up to Natalie, this local pianist the staff were talking about. Perhaps we should include her in the program somehow. Natalie looked up from her tablet with surprise. Include her? How? A smile played at the corner of Volkov's mouth. As an opening act, a brief performance to set the stage, so to speak. Is that really necessary? The program is already quite full, and it would be a nice gesture to the community, Volkov interrupted, giving one of their own a chance to share the stage with me. The perfect charity angle, don't you think? Natalie studied his expression. She had worked with him long enough to know when he was being genuinely generous and when he had other motives. This definitely seemed like the latter. What are you really thinking, Anton? He shrugged, cutting into his perfectly cooked steak. I'm curious, that's all. These people talk about her as if she's some kind of musical miracle. It might be educational for them to see the difference between a local teacher and a true master. Natalie sighed. So you want to humiliate her? Not at all, Volkov replied, though his eyes told a different story. I want to give her an opportunity. And if that opportunity happens to provide some perspective to her adoring fans, well, that's just an added benefit. As night fell over Meridian, Volkov stood at his hotel window, looking out at the small town with its twinkling lights. Tomorrow he would suggest his idea at the final rehearsal. A little excitement before the main event. A local teacher trying her best before the master took the stage. He smiled to himself, already imagining the stark contrast between this Rose person's playing and his own. It would be a valuable lesson for everyone involved. After all, he told himself, sometimes people needed to be reminded of the difference between amateur enthusiasm and true artistic brilliance. The mayor of Meridian had organized a small reception the evening before the concert. It was held in the town hall's modest ballroom, decorated with twinkling lights and fresh flowers for the occasion. Local dignitaries, sponsors of the charity event, and a handful of lucky ticket holders mingled, all dressed in their finest attire, anxiously awaiting the guest of honor. When Anton Volkov finally made his entrance 30 minutes late, the crowd parted like the Red Sea. He wore a perfectly tailored black suit that probably cost more than what most people in the room earned in a month. His entrance was practiced, casual enough to seem effortless yet calculated to draw every eye in his direction. Mr. Volkov, what an honor, the mayor gushed, rushing forward to shake his hand. We're so grateful you've included our humble town in your tour. Anton offered a practiced smile. The pleasure is mine. I've always believed music education should reach every corner of the world. The words sounded sincere enough, though Natalie, standing just behind him, knew they were lines he repeated at every charity event. As the pianist accepted a glass of champagne, declining the local wine the mayor had proudly offered, he scanned the room. These were exactly the type of provincial gatherings he endured, rather than enjoyed, full of well-meaning music, appreciators who couldn't tell Chopin from Liszt if their lives depended on it. He was preparing to make an excuse to leave early when a conversation nearby caught his attention. Such a shame Rose isn't here tonight. She would have loved the quartet they had playing earlier. You know how she is about these public events. Ever since what happened in Boston, she keeps to herself. Anton casually shifted closer to the two middle-aged women speaking. What happened in Boston? He asked, inserting himself into their conversation with the confidence of someone who believed his celebrity gave him the right to join any discussion. The women turned, momentarily startled by his sudden interest. Oh, Mr. Volkov, the shorter one stammered. We were just talking about Rose Winters, our local piano teacher. Yes, I heard about her yesterday during rehearsal. Apparently she's quite talented. The women exchanged knowing looks. Talented doesn't begin to describe it, the taller one said. Rose was on track to become a concert pianist just like you. She studied at the conservatory, won several international competitions in her 20s. Really? Anton raised an eyebrow, genuine curiosity mixing with skepticism. And yet she teaches children in a small town now? What happened? The women hesitated, clearly uncomfortable sharing someone else's personal story. It's not really our place, the shorter one finally said, but there was an incident during a high-profile performance in Boston about 15 years ago. Rose never performed professionally after that. Anton's interest was now fully piqued. A failed pianist with a mysterious past, it was almost too perfect. I'd very much like to meet this Rose Winters, he announced. Perhaps she could even play something at my concert tomorrow, as a special local addition to the program. The mayor, who had been hovering nearby trying to rejoin the conversation with the evening star, practically jumped with excitement. What a wonderful idea. A collaboration between our town's finest musician and a world-renowned master. Rose opening for Anton Volkov. It would make the event even more special. Do you think she would do it? Anton asked, feigning sincere interest while inwardly amused by the thought of showing up this local legend. She's very private these days, the taller woman cautioned. She hasn't performed publicly in years, just the occasional piece at her students' recitals. All the more reason to give her this opportunity, Anton insisted, his voice carrying enough to draw attention from nearby guests. Music is meant to be shared, not hidden away. I'm sure with a little encouragement from her community, she might reconsider her stage fright. He emphasized the last two words just enough to make them sound like an accusation of weakness, rather than a genuine condition. The mayor was practically bouncing with enthusiasm. I'll speak to her personally first thing tomorrow morning. What a coup this would be. As the reception continued, word of the possible addition to the program spread through the room. Anton observed with satisfaction how excited everyone became at the prospect. It was almost comical how these people believed their local piano teacher could share a stage with him. Later that night, back in his hotel suite, Natalie confronted him. "You're really going through with this plan to have the local woman perform?" Anton was scrolling through his phone, barely looking up. "Why not? It adds a charming local angle to the charity event." "That's not why you're doing it," Natalie said flatly. "I've worked with you long enough to know when you're up to something." He finally put his phone down and smiled. "Fine. Yes, I'm curious to hear this supposedly amazing pianist who gave up her career. And yes, I think it will make an excellent contrast to my performance. The audience will appreciate me even more after hearing someone who's been teaching Mary Had a Little Lamb to 5-year-olds for the past decade." Natalie shook her head. "Sometimes I don't understand why I still work for you." "Because I'm brilliant and you know it," he replied without a trace of humility. "Besides, I'm doing this woman a favor. One last moment in the spotlight before she returns to obscurity." The next morning, Rose Winters was in the middle of teaching a piano lesson when her doorbell rang insistently. Her student, a diligent 10-year-old boy named Peter, paused mid-scale. "Keep going," Rose encouraged him. "I'll just see who that is." She opened the front door to find Mayor Wilson standing there, practically vibrating with excitement, along with Tom from the concert hall and 2 other members of the town council. "Rose, wonderful news," the mayor announced without preamble. "You've been invited to perform at tonight's concert." Rose's expression shifted from confusion to alarm. "What? No, there must be some mistake." "No mistake. Anton Volkov himself requested you as the opening act. He's heard all about your talent and wants you to play a piece before his performance. Isn't it magnificent?" Rose's face had gone pale. She glanced back toward her living room where Peter was still dutifully practicing his scales. "I have lessons all day," she said quietly, "and I don't perform anymore." "You all know that." Tom stepped forward. "Rose, it's just one piece. 10 minutes at most. The whole town would love to hear you play again on a proper stage." "The whole town hears me play at the student recitals twice a year," she countered. "It's not the same," one of the council members chimed in. "This is a real concert with Anton Volkov." Rose crossed her arms, her stance becoming more defensive. "I appreciate the invitation, but my answer is no. Please thank Mr. Volkov for his consideration." The mayor's face fell. "But Rose, this opportunity is not one I'm interested in," she finished firmly. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a student waiting." She closed the door before they could protest further, then leaned against it, her heart racing as memories she'd kept buried for years threatened to surface. Performing in public again in front of a critical audience alongside a famous pianist known for his perfectionism. It was her worst nightmare. "Ms. Winters?" Peter called from the living room. "Are you okay?" Rose took a deep breath and returned to the piano, forcing a smile. "Yes, just fine. Now let's work on that Clementi sonatina." Throughout the day, as Rose taught her scheduled lessons, the phone kept ringing. Former students, friends, local business owners, word had spread through town like wildfire, and everyone seemed to have an opinion about why she should accept Volkov's invitation. "It would inspire my daughter to take her lessons more seriously," one mother pleaded. "The music school could use the publicity," argued the director. "You can't let that arrogant man think our town doesn't have real talent," insisted the owner of the local bookstore. By late afternoon, Rose's patience was wearing thin. After her last student left, she sat alone at her piano, a well-maintained upright that wasn't fancy but had a warm, rich tone she preferred to many grander instruments. She placed her fingers on the keys but didn't press them, feeling the familiar comfort of the cool ivory beneath her fingertips. A soft knock at her door pulled her from her thoughts. She opened it to find Tom standing there alone, holding 2 cups of coffee from the local cafe. "Peace offering," he said, extending 1 cup to her. "I figured you could use this after the day you've probably had." Rose accepted the coffee with a tired smile and gestured for him to come in. "I'm not going to try to convince you," Tom said as they sat in her small living room. "But I thought you should know the whole story." "What do you mean?" Tom sighed. "Volkov. He's not inviting you because he heard about your talent and wants to share the stage. From what I observed during rehearsals and what Natalie, his assistant, hinted to me, he's doing it as some kind of ego trip. He thinks putting you on stage before him will make him look better by comparison. Rose laughed softly, without humor. Well, he's probably right. I haven't performed seriously in 15 years. That's not true, Tom argued. I've heard you play at the Winter Festival and at student recitals. You're better than he is in ways he can't even understand. Rose shook her head. Technical skill isn't everything, Tom interrupted. You play with your heart? He plays with his hands. They sat in silence for a moment, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the room. He's expecting you to say no, Tom finally said. The mayor told him about your refusal and he just smirked, said something about some talents are better left undiscovered. Rose's eyes narrowed slightly. Did he now? Tom nodded. Look, I'm not saying you should do it to prove him wrong. You don't owe him or anyone else a performance. I just thought you should know what kind of game he's playing. After Tom left, Rose sat at her piano again. This time her fingers found the keys naturally and she began to play, softly at first, then with growing intensity. It was Chopin's Nocturne No. 20 in C-sharp minor, a piece she had played countless times, one that had become almost a part of her. The music filled her small house as the evening light faded. When the final notes died away, Rose made her decision. Rose barely slept that night. She tossed and turned as memories from her past collided with thoughts of Anton Volkov and his arrogant challenge. By morning, she had made up her mind. She wouldn't play for him or to prove anything to him, but perhaps it was time to face the fear that had controlled her life for 15 years. She reached for her phone and dialed the mayor's number. Before she could change her mind, Mayor Wilson? It's Rose. About tonight's concert. 2 hours later, Rose found herself sitting in the empty concert hall, running her fingers lightly over the keys of the grand piano. The instrument was far superior to her modest upright at home, with a responsiveness that both thrilled and terrified her. Tom appeared from backstage, surprised to see her there. Rose, the mayor just told me the news. Are you sure about this? She nodded, though uncertainty flickered in her eyes. Not entirely, but I need to do it anyway. What changed your mind? Rose played a soft chord, letting it resonate through the empty hall. 15 years is a long time to let one bad day define your life. Tom smiled and sat in the front row. Want to practice with an audience of one? Actually, I'd rather talk about the piano. What can you tell me about this instrument? I'll need to know how it responds before tonight. For the next hour, Rose familiarized herself with the piano, playing fragments of pieces, testing its action and tone. She deliberately avoided playing the Chopin Nocturne she had selected for her performance. That piece lived in her heart, and she would save its full expression for when it mattered most. As she was preparing to leave, the hall doors opened. Anton Volkov walked in with Natalie trailing behind him. He stopped short when he spotted Rose at the piano. "Ah, the local legend," he said, his voice echoing in the empty space. "I hear you've reconsidered my invitation." Rose stood up from the bench, smoothing her simple dress. "Mr. Volkov." "Yes, I've agreed to play one piece before your performance." Anton approached the stage, studying her with undisguised curiosity. Up close, Rose could see the fine lines around his eyes that professional photographs usually erased, signs of a demanding career and, perhaps, a demanding personality. "May I ask what you'll be playing?" he inquired, his tone suggesting he was merely making polite conversation. Chopin's Nocturne in C-sharp minor. Something flickered across Anton's face. Surprise, perhaps even respect. It wasn't an easy piece, nor was it a showy one that amateurs typically selected to impress. An interesting choice, not what I would have expected from a small-town piano teacher. Rose met his gaze steadily. "And what would you have expected, Mr. Volkov?" "Für Elise?" "Claire de Lune." The corners of his mouth twitched. "Something more. Accessible, perhaps." "I don't play to be accessible," Rose replied. "I play because the music demands to be played." Anton raised an eyebrow. "Well, that's very poetic. I look forward to your interpretation tonight." As Rose gathered her things to leave, Anton sat at the piano and began to play, a dazzling run of notes that showcased his technical brilliance. It was a not-so-subtle reminder of his mastery, a musical flexing of muscles. Rose paused at the stage door listening. His playing was flawless, every note precisely where it should be. every dynamic shift perfectly executed. And yet something was missing, something she couldn't quite name. "Impressive," she said simply, then left without waiting for his response. Outside the concert hall, Rose took a deep breath of fresh air. Her hands were trembling slightly. What had she gotten herself into? Her phone buzzed with a text from one of her adult students. "Just heard the news. The whole town is talking about it. We're all so proud of you, Rose." More messages followed throughout the day. Former students, parents, friends. Word had spread quickly, and it seemed everyone in Meridian would be at the concert tonight. The pressure mounted with each passing hour. By late afternoon, Rose found herself sitting on a bench in the small park near her home, trying to quiet her mind. She watched children playing, couples walking hand in hand, an elderly man feeding pigeons, ordinary people living ordinary lives, untouched by the anxiety that gripped her. A young woman approached, hesitant. "Ms. Winters? I'm sorry to bother you, but I just wanted to say thank you." Rose looked up, not recognizing her. "For what?" "I took lessons from you when I was 10, just for a year before my family moved away. You probably don't remember me, I wasn't very good." "Lisa," Rose said, the name coming to her suddenly. "You struggled with rhythm but had a beautiful touch on the melodic passages." The young woman's face lit up. "You do remember? Those lessons meant so much to me. I still play, just for myself, but it brings me joy every day. When I heard you were performing tonight, I drove back just to hear you play." As Lisa walked away, Rose felt something shift inside her. Perhaps this performance wasn't about Anton Volkov at all. Perhaps it was about all the Lisas who found joy in music because someone once showed them how to listen with their heart. Rose returned home and changed into the outfit she had chosen for the evening, a simple dark blue dress. Elegant but understated, she wore her graying hair loose around her shoulders rather than in her usual practical bun. At the last minute, she fastened a small silver pin to her dress, a gift from her former teacher at the conservatory, a reminder of who she had once been. As evening fell, the concert hall filled with an excited crowd. Backstage, Rose peeked through the curtains, her pulse quickening at the sight of so many familiar faces. The mayor had arranged for a special section near the front for her current and former students. Tom appeared at her side with a cup of tea. "Nervous?" "Terrified," she admitted, accepting the tea gratefully. "But in a way I haven't felt in years. It's like waking up after a very long sleep." From the other side of the backstage area, Anton watched their exchange with interest. The woman was not what he had expected. There was a quiet dignity about her that didn't fit his mental image of a failed pianist turned small-town teacher. Natalie approached him as he adjusted his cufflinks. "The hall is completely full. Standing room only." "Because of her?" Anton asked, nodding toward Rose. "Apparently. The local paper ran a story about her agreeing to perform after 15 years. It's created quite a buzz." Anton frowned slightly. This wasn't how he had envisioned the evening unfolding. The local teacher was supposed to be a brief opening act, quickly forgotten once he took the stage. Instead, she had become the headline. The stage manager appeared. "5 minutes, Ms. Winters." Rose set down her tea, her hands trembling visibly now. Tom gave her shoulder a gentle squeeze. "Just play like you do at home. Forget everything else." Anton approached, his expression unreadable. "A word of advice," he said, his voice low enough that only Rose could hear. "Don't think about what happened in Boston. It will only distract you." Rose stiffened. "How do you know about Boston?" "I made some inquiries. A talented young pianist has a memory lapse during a high-profile performance, freezes on stage, and never performs again. It's a familiar story in our world." "Is this your way of offering support or ensuring I fail?" Rose asked, her voice steady despite the churning in her stomach. Anton smiled thinly. "Consider it professional courtesy. We all have moments we'd rather forget." Before Rose could respond, the lights dimmed and the mayor stepped onto the stage to welcome the audience and introduce the evening's program. "And we have a special treat before Mr. Volkov's performance. Our very own Rose Winters has graciously agreed to play for us tonight. As many of you know, Rose has been nurturing the musical talents of our community's children for many years, but some may not know that she was once on the path to a concert career herself. Tonight we have the rare privilege of hearing her play again on a concert stage." Applause thundered through the hall, warmer and more enthusiastic than any Anton had received in recent memory. These people truly loved this woman. The stage manager nodded to Rose. You're on. Rose closed her eyes briefly, then walked onto the stage. The bright lights momentarily blinded her, and the applause swelled to a deafening roar. For one terrible moment, she was back in Boston, 28 years old, paralyzed by fear as the music fled from her mind. Then she spotted Lisa in the audience, leaning forward in her seat with an encouraging smile. Behind her, rows of faces she recognized, students past and present, neighbors, friends who had stood by her through her darkest days. Rose made her way to the piano and sat down, adjusting the bench with the careful precision of someone buying time. The hall grew silent, the anticipation almost palpable. She placed her hands on the keys and took a deep breath. From the wings, Anton watched, his expression shifting from mild curiosity to something more complex. There was something in the way she sat at the piano, a belonging, as if piano and pianist were two halves of a whole finally reunited. Rose closed her eyes and began to play. The first notes of Chopin's Nocturne in C-sharp minor drifted through the concert hall like a question hanging in the air. Rose played the opening softly, almost tentatively, as if she were discovering the music for the first time, rather than performing a piece she had known for decades. From the wings, Anton listened with his arms crossed, expecting to hear the hesitant, overly cautious approach typical of someone who hadn't performed professionally in years. But as the melody unfolded, his posture changed. He uncrossed his arms and leaned forward slightly, his eyes narrowing in concentration. There was something different about her playing. Something unexpected. The audience sat perfectly still, collectively holding their breath. Many had heard Rose play before at student recitals or local events, but never like this. This was Rose Winters without constraints. Rose Winters remembering who she had been before Boston, who she still was beneath the layers of fear and self-doubt. As the piece progressed, her touch became more assured. The music swelled and receded like ocean waves, each phrase connecting to the next with an inevitability that made it seem as though the composer himself were in the room, guiding her hands. In the third row, Lisa wiped a tear from her cheek. Next to her, an elderly man who had never heard classical music performed live before, found himself gripping the armrests of his seat, afraid to move lest he break the spell being woven around them all. Anton found himself moving closer to the edge of the stage, drawn by something he couldn't quite identify. Rose's technique wasn't flawless. There were occasional hesitations, small technical imperfections that he would never have allowed in his own playing. Yet somehow those very imperfections made the music more honest, more human. The Nocturne took on a narrative quality in Rose's hands. It wasn't just a beautiful piece of music. It was a story being told in real time. A story about loss and longing, about moments of perfect joy amid profound sadness. The emotion in her playing wasn't manufactured or performed. It was lived, breathed, experienced. In the audience, Tom watched the faces around him. The mayor, who normally checked his watch repeatedly during cultural events, was completely engrossed. A group of teenagers who had come only because their parents made them had put away their phones. Their expressions open and vulnerable in a way only music can evoke. Rose reached the middle section of the piece where the music turns more turbulent. Her body swayed slightly with the shifting harmonies, her face revealing the physical experience of the music passing through her. She wasn't performing for the audience. She was communing with the composer across the centuries, having a deeply personal conversation through his notes. Anton found himself holding his breath. In his decades-long career, he had heard countless interpretations of this nocturne, some technically superior to what he was hearing now. Yet he couldn't remember the last time he had been moved by a performance, truly moved in a way that made him forget to analyze, forget to compare, forget everything except the pure experience of listening. As Rose approached the most technically demanding passage, a shadow of that old fear flickered across her face, barely noticeable to anyone who wasn't watching as intently as Anton was. For a heart-stopping moment, her fingers hesitated above the keys. In the wings, Natalie saw it too and glanced worriedly at Anton, expecting to see a smirk of satisfaction that his prediction about her failure was coming true. Instead, she was shocked to see Anton mouthing something, words of encouragement, as if he were sending a message directly to Rose. "Keep going," his lips seemed to say. "You know this. Trust yourself. Whether by coincidence or some unspoken connection, Rose took a deep breath and plunged forward into the passage. Her fingers found the right keys, not with mechanical precision but with emotional truth. A few notes were blurred, but the heart of the music remained intact, even enhanced by the raw humanity of her struggle. The hall was so quiet now that even those in the last row could hear the subtle changes in dynamics. The breathing of the piano under Rose's hands. A drop of water fell on the keys, a tear she hadn't even realized she'd shed. As the piece moved toward its conclusion, returning to the gentle melancholy of the opening theme, something extraordinary happened in the concert hall. The barrier between performer and audience dissolved completely. Rose wasn't playing for them. They were experiencing the music together, a collective journey through joy and pain, hope and resignation. The final notes hung in the air like a benediction. Rose's hands remained on the keys for several seconds after the sound faded, as if reluctant to break the connection with the instrument. Then silence. Complete, absolute silence. For one terrible moment, Rose thought she had failed, that her performance had been so inadequate that the audience didn't even know it was over. She finally looked up, her face vulnerable and open in a way Anton had never seen in another musician. Then the applause began. Not the polite, measured applause of a typical classical concert, but a raw, emotional outpouring. People were on their feet, some calling out "Bravo," while others simply wept openly. The mayor was dabbing at his eyes with a handkerchief. Lisa was smiling through tears. Rose stood shakily and offered a modest bow, clearly overwhelmed by the response. As she turned to leave the stage, her eyes met Anton's. She expected to see disappointment or disdain, the judgment of a technical master confronted with amateur emotionalism. Instead, she saw something that shocked her more than the audience's reaction. Anton Volkov, the great virtuoso, the perfectionist, the man known for his emotional detachment, had tears in his eyes. He stepped back quickly as she exited the stage, turning away to hide his face. Natalie reached out to touch his arm, but he shrugged her off, moving deeper into the shadows backstage. Rose found herself in a small dressing room, her whole body trembling with released tension. The door opened and Tom rushed in, pulling her into a fierce hug. "Rose, that was—" "I don't even have words," he said, his voice choked with emotion. Behind him, a stream of well-wishers tried to enter. The mayor, former students, audience members who had somehow found their way backstage. The stage manager held them back, insisting that Ms. Winters needed a moment before Anton Volkov's performance. "I need some air," Rose said to Tom. "Just for a minute." He nodded, understanding, and helped clear a path for her to a side door that led to a small courtyard behind the concert hall. The night air was cool against her flushed skin. She leaned against the brick wall, taking deep breaths, trying to process what had just happened. Inside, the audience remained standing, the applause continuing far longer than was customary. The stage manager approached Anton, who was still hidden in the wings. "Mr. Volkov, they're ready for you, but the audience is, well, they're still responding to Ms. Winters. Should we dim the lights to signal them to take their seats?" Anton didn't respond immediately. He was staring at his hands that had played the world's most technically difficult pieces flawlessly, hands that had earned him fame and fortune and the adoration of millions. Yet in that moment he wondered if those hands had ever truly made music the way Rose Winters had just done. "Mr. Volkov, we're running behind schedule." Anton looked up, his expression uncharacteristically uncertain. "Give me a moment," he said, then walked away, ignoring the stage manager's confused protest. He found Rose in the courtyard, her face tilted up to the night sky. She turned at the sound of his footsteps, quickly wiping away tears. "Mr. Volkov, I'm sorry if I've delayed your performance. They're waiting for you." Anton stood a few feet away, studying her with new eyes. "Why did you stop?" he asked abruptly. "After Boston, why did you walk away from a career that could have been extraordinary?" Rose looked surprised by the question. "You know what happened. I froze, forgot the music. Humiliated myself in front of critics and peers. That happens to everyone at some point," Anton said dismissively. "You pick yourself up and continue. You were too talented to quit over one bad performance." Rose turned to face him fully. "It wasn't about talent, Mr. Volkov, or even about fear, though that's what I told myself for years. I walked away because I realized that night that I was playing for the wrong reasons, for approval, for success, for my place in the hierarchy of pianists. When the music left me on that stage in Boston, I had nothing left. I was empty. She gestured toward the concert hall. Tonight I played because the music itself mattered. Only the music. And it didn't leave me. Anton was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost its usual polished confidence. I haven't played like that in 20 years, he admitted quietly. Perhaps never. The stage manager appeared at the doorway looking frantic. Mr. Volkov, please. The audience. Tell them there will be a brief intermission, Anton said without looking away from Rose. Ms. Winters and I need to discuss the second half of the program. After the confused stage manager left, Rose looked at Anton questioningly. The second half? I don't understand. Anton's face showed an emotion Rose couldn't quite identify. Something between determination and fear. Something that made him suddenly appear human in a way his perfectly constructed public persona never had. I'd like to propose a change to tonight's program, he said. Something unexpected. Rose looked at Anton with confusion in her eyes. What kind of change? Anton ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, mussing it slightly, a small but telling break in his usually impeccable appearance. I'd like to play with you, he said, the words coming out in a rush. Not my planned program, something together. Rose stared at him. A duet? We haven't rehearsed anything. Not a traditional duet, Anton interrupted. Something different. A conversation. Before Rose could respond, he continued, speaking faster now as if afraid he might change his mind. I've spent my entire career perfecting every note, every phrase. Technical mastery was everything. But listening to you play just now, he paused, struggling to find the right words. It reminded me of why I started playing in the first place. Before the competitions and the critics and the world tours, Rose studied his face, seeing genuine vulnerability there for the first time. What are you suggesting exactly? I'll begin a piece, something we both know well. Then you respond, not with the same piece but with whatever music speaks to you in that moment. We alternate. A musical conversation. It was such an unconventional idea, almost radical for a formal classical concert. The kind of musical experimentation that happened in late-night jazz clubs or private jam sessions, not on concert hall stages. The audience came to hear you play Rachmaninoff and Liszt, Rose said. Not to witness some impromptu experiment, Anton shook his head. They came for music that moves them. You just showed me the difference between playing notes perfectly and making actual music. He hesitated, then added quietly, I want to try making music again, real music. And I need your help to remember how. The raw honesty in his voice touched something in Rose. She recognized the look in his eyes, the same desperate hunger she had felt in Boston all those years ago, standing frozen on stage, realizing that something essential had been lost in her pursuit of technical perfection. Okay, she said simply. Relief flooded Anton's face, then uncertainty. You'll do it? Rose nodded. But not for you. For the music. Together they walked back into the concert hall. The audience, which had been buzzing with conversation during the unexpected intermission, fell silent as they both appeared on stage. Confusion was evident on many faces. Rose was supposed to be done and Anton was supposed to be performing solo. The mayor hurried to the edge of the stage. Mr. Volkov, is everything all right? Perfectly all right, Anton assured him with a smile more genuine than any he'd offered since arriving in Meridian. There's been a slight change to the program. He walked to the microphone at center stage. The audience watched in bewildered silence as Rose took a seat in a chair near the piano, rather than exiting. Ladies and gentlemen, Anton began, his voice filling the hall without effort. First, I think we should acknowledge once more the extraordinary performance by your own Rose Winters. The audience erupted into applause again, many rising to their feet. Rose blushed and gave a small nod of acknowledgement. What we witnessed was not just beautiful playing, but a reminder of music's true purpose, Anton continued. And it has inspired me to offer something different tonight. Instead of my planned program, Ms. Winters and I will be presenting something more spontaneous. Murmurs spread through the audience. In the front row, Natalie's eyes widened in alarm. This was so far outside Anton's methodical, controlled approach to performances that she wondered if he was having some kind of breakdown. Anton sat at the piano, adjusting the bench with the same precise movements he always used before a performance. But there was something different in his posture, a slight softening of his rigid perfection. Music began as conversation, he explained to the audience. Before recordings and rehearsed performances, it was a living, breathing exchange. Tonight, Rose and I will attempt to return to those roots. He glanced at Rose, who gave him a small nod. Then he turned to the keys and began to play. He chose Bach's Prelude in C major, one of the most famous pieces in the piano repertoire, deceptively simple on its surface but containing entire worlds within its arpeggiated patterns. Anton played it with his usual technical brilliance, but there was a questioning quality to his interpretation, as if he were exploring the piece rather than simply executing it. When he finished, he looked to Rose, his expression both challenge and invitation. Rose moved to the piano as Anton stepped away. She sat for a moment in thought, then began to play Debussy's Clair de Lune. Her choice was a response to the structured mathematics of Bach, where his piece had been about pattern and perfection. Hers was about light and shadow, moonlight on water. She played only the opening section before stopping and looking to Anton. The audience, initially confused by this unconventional approach, was now leaning forward in their seats, collectively holding their breath at the musical story unfolding before them. Anton returned to the piano. This time he played Chopin, a stormy section from one of the ballades, his fingers flying across the keys with passionate intensity. It was as if he were saying through music, "This is what I know. This is what I've built my career on. Technical brilliance and dramatic power." When Rose took her turn, she responded with a gentle Mozart melody as if to say, "There is also beauty in simplicity." Her playing was clear and unadorned, allowing the pure architecture of the music to shine through. With each exchange, something remarkable happened. Anton's playing began to change. The technical perfection remained, but something new emerged alongside it. A vulnerability, an openness, a willingness to risk emotional exposure over flawless execution. And Rose, too, was changing. With each turn at the piano, her confidence grew. She began to incorporate more technically demanding passages, not shying away from the virtuosic elements she had once mastered. The audience watched in wonder as these two pianists, one a world-famous virtuoso, the other a small-town teacher, engaged in a musical dialogue that transcended words. It was like watching two people from different countries find a common language. Their musical conversation built in intensity and depth. At one point, Anton began a familiar melody from Schumann's Scenes from Childhood, and Rose seamlessly joined him on the same piano, turning it into a four-hand improvisation. Their shoulders touched as they shared the bench, two artists now in perfect communion through music. Tom watched from the wings, amazed at the transformation in both pianists. Rose played with a freedom he had never seen before, while Anton had shed the armor of his perfectionism to reveal the beating heart beneath. As their musical journey neared its end, Anton began playing Chopin's Nocturne in C-sharp minor, the very piece Rose had performed earlier. But his interpretation was entirely different from his usual approach. Gone was the technical showmanship, replaced by an almost reverent exploration of the emotional landscape of the piece. He played only the opening theme before looking to Rose. She joined him on the bench again, and together they completed the Nocturne as a duet, their four hands dancing around each other on the keyboard, sometimes overlapping, sometimes taking separate paths, but always in perfect harmony. The final notes faded into a silence so profound it seemed to have physical weight. For several heartbeats, no one moved, no one breathed. Anton and Rose remained at the piano, hands still on the keys, the connection between them almost visible in the air. Then the audience erupted. People were on their feet, cheering, some openly sobbing. What they had witnessed wasn't just a performance, but a transformation. Music as it was meant to be. Music as a living conversation between artist and instrument, between performer and audience, between one human heart and another. Backstage, after multiple curtain calls, Anton and Rose stood in companionable silence, both still processing what had happened. "Thank you," Anton said finally, his voice rough with emotion. "You've given me a gift I didn't know I needed," Rose smiled. "Perhaps we both received something we needed." Natalie approached, still looking slightly dazed. "Anton, that was... I don't have words. But the press will want statements, and we should think about how to... Later, Anton said gently, waving her concerns away. Some experiences shouldn't be immediately packaged and explained. As the evening wound down and the audience reluctantly dispersed, still buzzing about what they had witnessed, Anton and Rose found themselves sitting in the now empty concert hall. "What happens now?" Rose asked. Anton looked thoughtful. "For me, I think I need to reconsider some things. Perhaps take a break from touring. Remember why I play music in the first place. And your next concert? Will you go back to your usual program?" "I don't think I can," Anton admitted. "Not in the same way." "You've ruined me, Rose Winters." He smiled as he said it, a genuine smile that transformed his face. 6 months later, the Meridian Gazette ran a story with the headline, "Local teacher and world-famous pianist launch music education program." The article detailed how Anton Volkov and Rose Winters had established a foundation to support music education in rural communities, with an emphasis on emotional expression alongside technical training. Their unusual duet performance had gone viral online, challenging conventional ideas about classical music presentation. Anton had indeed canceled the remainder of his tour, causing a stir in the music world, but had recently returned to performing, with a noticeably different approach that critics were calling revelatory and career redefining. Rose had started performing again too, in small, intimate venues where she could maintain the direct connection with audiences that gave her music its special power. She still taught in Meridian, but now her students included aspiring pianists who traveled hundreds of miles for the chance to learn from her. And twice a year, Anton returned to Meridian. They would give a charity concert together, not a polished, rehearsed program, but the same type of musical conversation that had so moved their first shared audience. Each performance was unique, unrepeatable, alive in a way that reminded everyone present of music's true purpose. Not to impress, but to connect. Not to demonstrate perfection, but to share what it means to be human, with all our glorious imperfections. The famous pianist who had once invited a small-town teacher to play, as a joke, had found something. He didn't expect not just a worthy musical colleague, but a guide back to his own artistic soul. And the teacher who had hidden her gift for 15 years had found the courage to share it again, on her own terms. Together, they reminded a world obsessed with flawless technique and virtuosic display that true mastery comes not from the hands, but from the heart.